Okay, Krystal, you're going to go next.
Hi, I'm Krystal. I live in a tiny rural town in Queensland called Dalby. It's very small, so very kind of isolating for that. I'm a blogger, so I'm not a coach. I don't work with clients. I'm a blogger and I have multiple websites, but my main one focuses on helping women get their life organized and manage all the things in their life with a little bit more focus on themselves. This year, I'm planning on building out my website set. I guess I have like 4 websites at the moment, but I want a bunch of niche sites, and I make most of my money through advertising for that. I joined Bootcamp in January 2021. At the time, I was still a paramedic, so that's my trade. I guess I'm an emergency paramedic, and I did that for 12 years. But in the last probably 2 years, I've had a lot of trauma around that, been to a lot of really, really tough jobs. And I kind of sat back and went, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this to myself? So I've actually been able to go full-time on my business this year, thanks to all the stuff with Bootcamp, which has been really exciting. And
Wow, that's so amazing to hear. Well done, Krystal. I'm sure that was, that's a hard transition to make.
It is. It's very much part of my identity. So I've had to do a lot of figuring out who I am outside of being a paramedic. I joined when I was 22. Like it's a long time to do that job.
It really is. And I think something that would be really interesting to talk about today as well, for those of us who have had to make a big transition, is, do we feel like that's the real world and what we do is kind of not the real world, because not many people might understand what you do. Are your friends and family pretty supportive? Have you making that transition?
Most of my family are paramedics. So my husband's paramedic, my brother, my sister-in-law, and another sister-in-law, and another brother. So I come from like a whole family of paramedics. But we've all actually had a big shift. So my brother's taking 12 months off, and we've all had this big shift in just, the job's changed a lot, and the whole medical system's changed a lot in Australia lately. So it's just a huge change to live in a world where you're not attached to your phone. We did on call, so we'd take the ambulance home. So you pretty much give up your life for a week. So it's very different, very different.
Here's where I want us to start. Okay, if we talk about mateship and friendliness and being down to earth as one of our unofficial values, I had an epiphany about 3 years ago, and I want to hear for anyone who wants to speak to this, but I think everyone will. I realized that my mateship extended to my pricing, because we literally say mates rates in Australia. So I was thinking, it's okay for me to charge Americans, but it's not okay for me to charge Australians, because they're my mates, they're my family. And then I realized it started extending. It extended to New Zealand, and then it started extending to the UK, because I was like, but I come from the UK like a couple of generations back, so they're kind of my family too. So it's not very matey of me, it's not mateship to charge my friends and family. And I had to really work on that it's okay for me to charge Australians. It's okay for me to market to Australians. And especially since I charge in US dollars, it was like a double whammy of like, oh my God, I'm not allowed to charge my mates, and I'm not allowed to charge them US dollars. So who's got something that they want to say about that? What came up for you?
Mine's a little bit different, because around 70% of my audience is American. And it's intentional, because most of my money comes from advertising, like I was saying, and advertisers spend a whole lot more money on an American audience. So I had a look back for last year, and particularly in December Q4, because that's like the very high end of the advertising revenue. And for every 1,000 views, for an Australian audience, I was getting $12, but for US audience, I was getting 40. So it's a huge, huge disparity for me in that regard. So I've had to be okay with targeting an American audience and leaving my Aussies behind in a way, which is kind of hard. But for me, it's meant that I've had to Americanize my writing. because a lot of Americans don't or won't read an article if it's got mum in it spelt with a U as opposed to mum with an O. And I've had people email me telling me my spelling's wrong because I've spelt it in like the English way as opposed to US English. And it's very different targeting them for that sort of stuff. And I've split test because I've had small priced items, printables, ebooks and things like that in the past. And I've split test and compared whether I got more sales if I sold in US dollars versus Australian dollars. And it is very much more sales in the US dollars. And for a few people, I just asked them why, like part of my audience, I spoke to them and I asked them why. And they said because they couldn't work out the conversion, even though it was cheaper for them to buy it in, like cheaper in that the dollar was less, the number of the dollar was less when they converted it over. They just didn't want to do that. So they, like Australian dollars, they just couldn't wrap their head around it. So they just left it and didn't buy. So it's been a bit of learning around that it's okay to charge in US dollars and to target a US audience. Which I feel really wrong saying.
No, you said something so juicy that was just like a dagger to my heart, and it's leaving people behind. Yeah, everyone's nodding. Everyone's like, because is that how it feels, that we go, well, that's where the money is, that's where the opportunity is. So am I being like a bitch for doing this?
It's kind of felt like that. And so my email list percentages are a little bit different. There's about 20% of my email list is Australian. And I get a lot of engagement from them, but they don't buy anything. So I have a membership as well, and they don't buy it. I got very small percentage of conversions for an Australian audience. And I believe a lot of that is because it's digital products. It's not something physical. And I've had the feedback of, but I can get it online for free. Like that, I can find all the information for free. I can find a printable on Pinterest for free. Like, why would I pay for this? So it's.
And you know what? I know heaps of Australians and they're buying stuff all the time. So I do think that there is a mindset shift that we need to make here of, like, it's okay for us to charge our fellow countrymen US dollars. It's okay to charge them info products, because everyone I know is always buying stuff from America. You know, so it's not true, but I do think there's still some stuff there that we have to work on in ourselves of like, not that we're being a traitor to our own country, but we're not being maybe fair and egalitarian by doing this. You said something else too, because I do the same thing. Our audience is probably about 60-70% American. Australia is our next biggest market, then UK, then Canada and New Zealand, but they're quite small. And I find that, you know, I'm not talking seasons. I'm not saying this fall. I say this October. I don't use mum. I'll say mama, like M-A-M-A. And so I write in US English for all my books too, right? And so there's something there, I think, that feels like we're kind of, I don't know, putting on an act, or we're, I don't know, maybe it feels a little bit inauthentic, or we feel like, again, we have to almost deny a part of ourselves. You know, I would say my accent's probably different when I'm talking to Australians than when I'm doing Americans. And I would say that my accent's probably changed a lot over the last 10 years, you know, marketing to the US market. So there's something there that might be something about being visible in our own countries, because we think we're going to look like a bit of a wanker being American.
Huge. I have a lot of problem around visibility, and I think that's why I love the online space, because I get to hide and I get to sit back. A few years ago, I had a Facebook post go like wicked viral. Like, I'm talking 25 plus million shares. It was shared in every major news outlet around the world. I had like news teams. It was shared by Ashton Kutcher, like weirdly viral. And like I said, I live in a really small town, and I live in literally the most conservative town in Australia. It has been voted the most conservative town in Australia. So I had a lot of like, who do you think you are? And it was a car safety post, so it had a lot to do with my job as well. And like I had paramedics going, oh, you know, you think you know stuff, and it was that visibility about who am I to say anything? Like, I'm not an expert. And I feel like that in a lot of areas around the Australian audience. Like in America, I feel like it's okay to be a contributor, but to an Australian audience, I feel like I have to be the guru. And I'm not qualified to be the guru. So I feel safer in an American audience.
I've got goosebumps around that. I really do. That is such a big, that's a big one.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know if everyone else does this as well, but like I actually don't do any work in my town. So I say no to speaking events. I don't do anything because I feel like I'm like, oh, cool, I can be Denise on camera and put on my makeup and stuff like that. But when I'm around town and I'm like yelling at my husband in Bunnings and like picking my nose in my car, I'm like, no, I don't want people to know who I am. And I like to pretend that just nobody knows who I am. And I think that it's the same visibility thing of like, oh, I don't want people to think I'm a wanker. I think I'm like too good for too big for my boots. And I'm from the Central Coast originally. And when I say that sometimes in America, I think people just assume I'm talking about California because California's got a Central Coast too. But I'm like, oh, no one has to know who I am. No, I'll just pretend. Oh, it's so funny. That's a really, honestly, Krystal, that blew my mind when you just said that, of like feeling like you have to be the guru in Australia because people might question your qualifications, or they might, know where you live, or they might know more about you.
And see, in my town, I'm known as a paramedic because I go to all these people. Like I've been to these people and it is very small, and they do see me around town in uniform, and they've seen the ambulance parked out the front of my house. Like people know where I live because an ambulance is parked there. And so talking to people about what I do, they're like, oh, but aren't you a paramedic? And it's just, again, it's a safe career. People know what it is. They know what you do. Whereas when you talk about what you do online, they're like, oh, but how does that even work?
So I'm just checking on the time. So we've got about 10 minutes left. So I would love to hear just one more thing from each person, maybe a block that you've worked on in the last year, especially in boot camp. And it could be a breakthrough that you have, or it could be something that you're still working on. And, when I think about this conversation about being in Australia, I think one thing that's really a recurring thing for me that I always have to work on is being down to earth. And I realized the last couple of years I've stopped sharing some things. Like I've stopped doing my year in reviews because I think, oh, it's not that relatable. It's not that down to earth to say, oh, look how much money I've made. Like, what a wanker. Who's going to see this in my family, or who's going to see this in my neighborhood? And, that for me is always recurring, is having to work on that down to earthness, which I think is very uniquely Australian.
For me, it's about the visibility thing. So it's safe for me to be visible. I had this thing. So when Mara asked me to do a video testimonial for boot camp, I'd recorded it. And I literally dropped my phone on my brand new laptop and did $1,000 worth of damage. So it's these things that keep coming up, like these little sabotages. And I'm just like, universe, what are you trying to tell me? Like, this is a big thing. So it's about putting myself out there and being visible. I've wanted to do a lot of stuff. I've wanted to do my YouTube channel and things like that. But I just feel like I don't have the perfect situation, or I don't have the perfect environment, or my hair's not right, or I don't look right, or my accent's not right. So really just being okay with being visible and putting myself out there. And a lot of that comes back to being okay with who I am and figuring out who I am. I've always been the kind of person who puts everybody else first and will do anything to make anybody else happy, and whatever everybody else's needs are, like whether it's my husband or my kids or anything. Like I've kind of always just fit in and always felt the need to fit in. And that's something that I guess boot camp has opened up a whole world of other things that I need to work on. So it's like the money layer, and the whole thing with money mindset is like that top layer. And then it kind of opens up all this other stuff. It's like, okay, well, this money thing's connected to this. but it's also causing this, this, and this in my life. So I've got to clear all that as well. So it's been really eye-opening for that. And yeah, just the visibility thing. It's safe for me to be seen. Huge thing.
Yeah, that sounds like it's a really big one. And it's safe for me to be seen by Australians, or it's safe for me to be seen by, as you said, people who don't need to put me on a pedestal, or yeah, I can see that's a really big one.